Morning, good afternoon, and morning, evening, depending on where you are connecting and joining us from. Thank you very much for taking this time to join us for this really important conversation on connected resilience, looking at gendered experiences of meaningful connectivity through a global pandemic. Some of you may have seen this report, which we published earlier this year in March of 2024. And so we are really hoping to give you some highlights of our findings on the study and share highlights from Asia specifically in terms of case studies, as well as hopefully hear from you in terms of any questions you may have, but also please feel free to share experiences that resonate from hearing about the findings of this work. I am joined today by several of my colleagues, but for this conversation, I will be joined by two of our senior research managers, Nyambura as well as Ingrid. In addition, we have two researchers who supported this work in Asia, Lisa Garcia from Foundation for Media Alternatives, as well as Jenny Sulfath, sorry about that, from Digital Empowerment Foundation. And you will hear from all of these amazing researchers as we continue with our presentation. If I could have the next slide, please. Awesome. So I think many of you will agree with me that it has the latest divide that is beginning to emerge is that divide amongst those who are already connected. Making meaningful connectivity an absolute necessity so that we go beyond just basic connectivity and making sure that people are meaningfully connected. However, despite this recognition, especially post-COVID-19 pandemic, too many women, poor people, as well as rural dwellers, and other people who are disadvantaged continue to be left behind in this journey of ensuring that everyone has access to meaningful connectivity. Next slide, please. When we look at these divides, not only is it just the divide between the rural and the urban, but one of the things that we began to notice post-COVID-19 is that the divide amongst those who are connected in terms of the extent to which they're able to utilize the internet is very different for different people based on the type of connectivity that they have. So I'm really pleased that we have Jenny and Lisa here to share with us some real examples of how women in some of these conditions and disadvantaged locations are able to continue to stay connected and the challenges that they have to overcome in order to do so. Next slide, please. The use of the internet has exponentially grown since the time we started to actually collect data on people and connectivity. And as you can see in this presentation here, that growth started to also sharply pick around the time when we were beginning to rely more on connectivity for things that actually help make our lives better. During the pandemic, it was also about getting access to healthcare information. It was about working from home, and it was also about being able to continue learning. We have sufficient anecdotes that show us how children who live in homes where they were not connected or they were not meaningfully connected have continuously been challenged in being able to connect and stay abreast with learning during that period. And just before we move on, I just want to take this moment to give you just a perspective on what we mean when we talk about basic connectivity and meaningful connectivity. Basic connectivity is the connectivity where you just have access and nobody really cares about the quality of that access. However, post-COVID-19, and in fact, even without COVID-19, let's be very honest, the standard for affordability is 1 gig of data for no more than 2% average monthly income. Many of us at 1 gig of data allocated to us for a whole month would not be able to join a conversation like the one that we are able to have from across the world with each other. There's so many things that we would be limited to do. Therefore, meaningful connectivity is going beyond just giving people access and making sure that it's affordable, but making sure also that it's a high quality, high speed access to the internet. At minimum, a 4G speed is the kind of speed that will enable you to work from home, to attend class, to engage in video messaging, and do a lot more to be able to just really participate in a digitized society. Meaningful connectivity also means being able to have an affordable device, at a minimum, a smart device that enables you to engage in these kinds of platforms, for example. So imagine if all you had was a feature phone, you definitely would not be able to engage, be able to see the video, the presentation, and be part of this digitized community, having the conversations that we are having. It also means that you have access to the internet on a daily basis if you need to, whether that access is through home, through school, through work. What it means is that you have access daily as needed, and that you have access to unlimited data, so that you are able to do the kinds of things that we are promised can help transform our lives when we engage online. And it also means that you have the requisite skills to be able to participate in a digitized workspaces as well. So I'm going to pause here, and I will invite my colleague Nyambura to please come in and give us highlights of this Connected Resilience report. Nyambura, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Onica, for the highlights, and in particular talking about meaningful connectivity, which is a challenge we all experience, whether in urban, in rural, but it's more pronounced in the rural areas. Just before we started this meeting, I realized connectivity wasn't so good for me here. So what I had to do was to buy some bundles just to ensure that I'm not disconnected or I don't start getting fluctuations as we continue. So that's the reality and something that we really need to work on. So going to our report, I'm going to give you a highlight of what we found out. That persistent digital divide has an economic impact. And as we will be discussing in these slides, we'll be seeing the various divides and the impact both in the past and what is likely to happen in the future if we do nothing about it. We also highlight some systemic barriers to digital inclusion, which again we'll be discussing. Disparities in internet access, whether urban, rural, or whether based in education level, whether based on your income, and the like, there are those disparities that really needs to be addressed. Also, the importance of meaningful connectivity, and Onica has already highlighted what we mean by meaningful connectivity. And then also we'll be highlighting strategies for enhancing digital inclusion. So this report goes into details in all these 5 areas, and we really encourage all of us to go through the report. Let's go to the next slide. So what was our research methodology? Just to mention that we started doing this research last year in June. We came up with a methodology that collected both quantitative and qualitative data. So we did focus group discussions in India, Mozambique, Nigeria, and the Philippines. And with this, we are honored to have the representative from some of these countries that will be telling us in depth what exactly we contextualize these issues. We also discussed with the policymakers in selected countries, also from NEPAD, regional organizations, just to get an insight of what they are doing in terms of policies, the opportunities they see, and also the challenges they see, and also the best way to move forward to ensure that we are addressing this digital divide. Then we also conducted surveys in 6 countries, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Ghana, Mozambique, South Africa, and Uganda. And basically, again, in these studies, we ensure that we are focused both in rural and urban areas. We also ensure that we are not just talking to those people who are using the internet. We also wanted to discuss with those people who are not using the internet to understand why exactly are they not using the internet. Because sometimes you may say it's an issue of access, but then some people may have access, but they're not using it. What are these challenges? And how can we collectively come up with solutions that will ensure that we move forward in an inclusive way? We go to the next slide. So what are some of these key highlights? That we found that the persistent digital divide has an economic impact. That if you don't do anything, move as we have been moving in the last 5 years, then we are likely to lose 500 billion USD in the next 5 years. In the last 10 years, we have lost $1 trillion. So basically, what we are saying that we need to act more. We know the issue of digital divide is something that has been in agenda in many countries, many organizations, many development partners, but it seems like we are not doing enough. Because basically, if you see that particular graph, it shows that there is loss and the loss is continuing. So what do we need to do collectively as individuals, as governments, as the civil society, as the private sector? Because if we don't work together, if we leave a particular group of people behind, then it means that as much as we want to push one group, then we are likely to achieve what we need to achieve. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, the importance of meaningful connectivity. And again, starting with the meaningful connectivity, my colleague Onica has already highlighted what we mean by that. And probably from our study, we realized that only about 60% of the people we interviewed have 4G plus internet connectivity. So what happens to the next 40%? And you'll also discover even the ones that have 4G, it is most of the time not reliable. We are again talking in terms of the internet, again, how many of us who are not obligated by their job that are fully connected. And then we're also talking about unlimited, and we're talking about the daily, these are the ITU packets. And in addition to that, it's not about just meaningful connectivity. When you are meaningfully connected, what percentage of your disposable income are you using? Because again, we don't want people to be fully connected, but then they're using all their earnings, they're using everything they have to be connected. So again, we are saying as per the ITU standard, 2% of your disposable income should not be spent on connectivity. So that is what we want to call affordable access. In most countries, and I think not just in Africa, I believe also in Asia, you'll find most people are spending between 15 and almost at 5% of their disposable income on connectivity. So again, what is the ripple effect of this? That means other aspects of our livelihoods are suffering. And therefore, we have to ensure that internet access is affordable. Then when it comes to supporting social environment, that we don't just want people to be online. They must have the education, they must have the skills, the digital skills, first of all, to navigate through the space and to ensure that they are getting what they need and in an effective and efficient way. So education and skills is very critical. Again, we are talking of relevant content. I want people to be connected, and once they are there, they don't have the right content. You need to actualize, you need to contextualize the issues. We want to ensure that we are talking about a village in India and we want them to be connected, then there must be something in that digital space that will improve their livelihoods. Because again, it's about improving our socio-economic livelihoods. It's about making our lives better. So once we are connected, then we must effectively and efficiently be able to improve our livelihoods. And again, we're talking about respect for human rights. We don't want women to be connected. We don't want young people to be connected. We don't want the elderly people to be connected. But the moment they are connected, then that's how they lose their money. That's how they end up being stalked. That's how they end up getting access to inappropriate content. So again, we are saying being connected in a safe environment. And when we look at all those aspects of connectivity, then we can say, yeah, universally meaningfully connected, and we are actually doing what we need to do in that digital space. Let's go to the next slide. So in our study, we noted there are disparities in internet access that based on where you are based geographically, are you in rural or urban areas? And our studies found that if you are in a rural setup, you are likely to be 3 times less connected than if you are in urban areas. So again, we are saying, if, based on your education level, the more you are educated, then the more you are likely to be meaningfully connected. And then education also determines what to do in that digital space. That the more you're educated and you are able to juggle between your improving your education, e-learning, you're able to do your e-health, you're able to do your trade, you're able to do a combination of activities in the digital space, and with that, then you are able to improve on your livelihoods. So again, we are saying rural people are less connected. People who are less educated, then they are less meaningfully connected. So again, we have to push both. We have to ensure that the last mile connectivity is not just left in urban areas, that even in rural areas, in the most of the rural places, then they must have the same kind of connectivity as in urban areas. And also in education, because again, we're talking of national curriculum, international competition. If you are competing with people who are, let's say, in a very connected area and people in a very rural area, teachers, again, they need to have these skills, they need to have this access, they need to be affordable. So that's what we are saying. Disparities in internet access, they need to be addressed from all these facets. Let's go to the next one. So what are these systemic barriers that have been a hindrance to connectivity? And you see one of them is infrastructure, both in terms of devices, in terms of connectivity, the last mile, in terms of electricity, it's still a challenge in most parts of rural setups, either in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. This is a challenge. We are also talking about inequalities at the household level that we find most female. Most of the time, from the studies we did in all these countries, you realize a big margin, a big percentage of our respondents, they dependent on devices that are owned by the male counterpart, may they be the husband, may they be the brothers. So with that, we see this kind of a barrier. Then also cultural things that you'll find most of the women, they don't have time really to work on or to be in the digital space to improve on their skills because they have competing activities. They have to deal with household chores that again, in terms of time consumption, they find themselves consuming more time on that. So again, in terms of when you accumulate all these barriers, and you realize that these systemic barriers, they have a big impact on digital inclusion. And with that, I will hand over, let's go to the next one. Yes, perfect. I hand over to my colleague Ingrid to continue with the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyambura. So I'll talk a bit more about what we see as achievable solutions to address this challenge. We did a wide range of scoping and review across policies in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And we also spoke with policymakers and did a series of focus group discussions with people implementing policies to really understand what the institutional challenges are and what a roadmap could look like to address some of these opportunities for gender responsive and gender transformative digital policies. So we identified that there are really a range of strategies that policies can adopt, and there's no single blanket solution, there's no quick fix solution. And in order to implement and really design effective and impactful policy, policymakers really need to look at people-centered solutions that can empower everyone, which requires conscious efforts that put community leaders and women themselves at the very front and center of any solution. So policymakers should engage with communities and stakeholders to design the appropriate strategy in that particular context, and really looking at moving beyond infrastructure. Closing the gender digital divide does not only rely on technological and connectivity solutions, but also, as mentioned previously, fostering a supportive social environment and providing affordable access to all. And this really relies on moving away from siloed interventions, which look only at kind of one aspect of connectivity or access or affordability to looking at a more holistic and comprehensive gender transformative approach that looks also at digital skills, relevant content and services and tools, online safety and security, for example, while also addressing the very critical social and cultural norms that Nyambura mentioned are major barriers for women's access and use of the internet. So in our report, we propose 4 tiers of achievable solutions. These are deep investments. These require substantial resources in a specific policy area or in a specific community, such as universal service and access funds. There are also grand visions, which combine really a long-term effort with dedicated funding to really revolutionize the status quo. This would be, for example, through national broadband strategies and plans. There are also easy wins, which are very specific changes that create tangible value, such as gender data collection and analysis in the ICT sector. And lastly, there are also scalable systems, which are really about systemic changes to norms, models, and ways of working, such as multi-stakeholder approaches or more community-owned solutions. Next slide, please. So I'll just run through a few examples of some of these demonstrations of good practices or promising practices that we found. And I'd encourage you to go into the report to find a lot more great examples. So community networks, for example, such as Gram Marg in India, have really significantly benefited local community connectivity and livelihoods, access to healthcare, educational materials, and e-government services. And these networks leverage innovative solutions like utilizing unused TV white space and optimizing spectrum allocation, and really serve to close the gap in provision of infrastructure and connectivity to rural and underserved areas, which has had a great benefit and impact on women specifically. Moving along to the example from Dominican Republic, I'll give a few examples across the region, but there are much more in the report to dive into. So in the Dominican Republic, the ICT regulator initiated a program called the Social Digital Basket, which provided a subsidy of smart devices and data to women-headed households. And this was based on evidence through national data that showed that impoverished households and unconnected households were much more likely to be women-headed households. And this really shows the importance of investing in women, not only to close the gender gap and for digital inclusion, but also to address wider economic inequalities. Moving along to Ghana. So in Ghana, the Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communications delivers very successful digital skills and literacy programs in communities. And part of the impact and the reason that they've been so successful is because they have intentional and direct involvement of community leaders, of local livelihood associations and local NGOs to carry out sensitization within the community, campaigns, for example, to address some of these deeply embedded gender and social norms that limit women's participation in these kind of programs and spaces. And the programs themselves really intentionally reach women by designing the curriculum and content to reflect their local experiences and realities, and by, for example, providing childcare at the program facilities. Moving along to look at regional and national policymaking. So, for example, in Bangladesh, the new National Broadband Plan of 2023 includes measurable gender targets, which create a framework to regularly review and monitor progress on closing the digital gender gap. At the regional level, the African Union's digital transformation strategy, as well as the strategy for gender equality, illustrate how digital can be embedded into gender policy and how gender can be embedded into digital policies through an integrated framework. So just to close, examples of these kind of promising practices that we outline in the report from Africa, Asia, and Latin America really offer policymakers and the digital development community guidance towards very tangible and impactful actions that they can take and that we all can take. And so I guess in closing, we really urge you all to use this report and this research as a catalyst to drive forward meaningful connectivity for women. And we welcome any further questions and conversations. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, both Ingrid and Nyambura. I would like to now please invite Jenny to share with us the case of India.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. So I'm Jenny, and I work with the research and advocacy team of Digital Empowerment Foundation. We are based out of Delhi. And I've been part of the partnering with the team who has put up this research and have conducted a few FTDs in India to contribute to the report. So now that we have heard a lot about the numbers, I would like to speak a little about what these numbers, what is the everydayness of these numbers look like. So we've interviewed urban and rural people both, but I would like to speak about a particular village in Maharashtra, in the state of Maharashtra, where people in one day of the week go to the market, sell all their agricultural produce, buy all their essential supplies, as well as download all the information they want, because for the rest of the week, they don't have access to internet, they don't have access to network. So the first slide actually speaks about this journey. So this is a water body that is connecting one of the villages which we visited. For anyone to reach this village or any of the villages to reach outside, one has to walk 2 kilometers, cross this river in a boat. You can also see motorbikes crossing the waters, and then take a public transportation. If they're lucky enough to get the public transportation, the transportation would cost somewhere around $50. But if they miss one of these boat, 2 of them are by government. If they miss this boat, then the cost would go up to $2 to $3. Now, the cost of taking a printout is actually like 1/10 of $1, 5 rupees. But to get to that store which prints out this paper, they have to spend from $1 to $3 to get to that place and then take a printout. So this is, the kind of exclusion generally the people face. Now, since it's expensive to actually go to the nearest town, now imagine who would be the person who is going and doing it. Like, then their family cannot move. So it is the male member of the family, because they can also carry their bikes in the boat, who would be going. And what gets downloaded, what kind of information that is omitted, all of that decided by this one person who is going to this town. Next slide, please. So the micro level practices in a village actually determine, women's mobility. And this slide is actually a small narrative about this. So I like the image of an Indian woman, which you all would like see in magazines and in movies. A lot of working women in India do not really wear a sari because it is time taking and it restricts your mobility. And for a lot of communities, like the community which I'm speaking about, who are indigenous, sari is an introduction from outside. It is introduced through the television. So when they have to go out, or then when they have to attend a meeting, they actually have to drape a sari. And when they are wearing a sari, they can't really paddle the boat. So they had to wait for the boatman. But there's no way to communicate with the boatman. So they'll have to wait on the other side for the boatman to come, which otherwise they would cross with their own smaller boats. So this is just to, show an example of how a seemingly minor issue, like a minor act, actually reproduces the gendered access to mobility and subsequently gendered access to information. Next slide, please. So the third slide is about, how when another FGD, so this was not in the waterlogged village, but it was a relatively connected village that they had intermittent access to internet, that in some places in their house, internet comes, or they are actually closer to this town. So in this FGD, where there was actually an elected representative from the local governance institution was also there. So, when we ask the women that how do you apply for a job or how do you access government entitlements, they say that they go to an internet cafe. So we assume that like at least a few times they must have gone to an internet cafe in the town. So when we ask them that how many of them have actually been to an internet cafe, none of them have ever been to an internet cafe actually. So, just to, can we move to the next slide? So just to, reflect on that, what it means to have access, and then how multiple marginalities actually constitute this.
Did we just lose Jenny?
I believe so.
Oh, that's too bad. Well,
I think she's
I'm back. Sorry,
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Welcome back. Take on.
Yeah. The network got disconnected. But yes. So the question is what it means to have, to be an indigenous woman. And majority of the women in the village migrate to the sugarcane plantations in the nearby state. So even when they're going there, they cannot really call anyone back at home because, so they were saying that there is one spot in the village where there is network at, for 10 or 20 minutes. So they have to coordinate from the plantations to give a call back to the village within this slot, where family members go to this particular spot to speak to their members for 10 or 20 minutes. And the plantations are also known for bonded labor. So imagine you are in some kind of danger in the plantation, but you have no means to contact anyone back at home. And, so this is the intersection of class, the ethnicity, the geographical remoteness, and gender actually constitute, this landscape of lack of access or, access to information in this particular village. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to contextualize it, this village, Savariya Dikar, is not an isolated case. So data from the National Sample Survey Organization and the National Family Health Survey actually show that, only 49.6% of women in rural areas have access to internet. The literacy rate of women is much lesser than men, both in urban India and rural India. And the only 14.9% of the rural households in India have a computer with an internet connection. With a larger, picture in India, 25,000 villages still do not have internet access or network access. So I'm just closing with this, that, how rampant the digital divide and the impact of it, and then how does it actually affect the most marginalized people in the country. That's something which we all have to take up. Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you so much for listening.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you so much, Jenny, for that. We will now move right on to Lisa from the Philippines. Lisa, if you could introduce yourself and then share the Philippines case study.
Yes, hello everyone. So my name is Lisa Garcia. I'm with the Foundation for Media Alternatives based in the Philippines. So I will be sharing with you the different case studies that we did based on, next slide please, based on focus group discussions that we held with women. We also had key informant interviews, and all in all, we were able to have a discussion with 28 women. So these women come from civil society organizations, small NGOs, 13 of them. So these are organizations working with women with disabilities, whether they are visually impaired, deaf, or have speech problems. There was one working with migrant groups, labor organizations, with indigenous women, with young people, informal workers, women informal workers, senior women, or those from the rural areas. And we also had interviews with individuals who do not belong to any organization. And we had a chance also to have an interview with a representative from one government agency, in particular, our Department of Information and Communications Technology. So next slide, please. So what did we notice based on the discussion that we had with the women, the interviews, since we tried to talk to them about their experience of using the internet or the lack of it during especially during the pandemic. So one of the findings is, of course, that the pandemic was a game changer for a lot of them, because before, when we talk to women, especially those in rural areas, it was not really a priority for them to be connected. But with the pandemic, there was that realization of the importance of being connected, especially for those who are working and studying, to keep up, of course, with your friends and families, for entertainment, or whether we're watching television, movies, or whether you're this is for games, and then also to purchase goods and services, because during the pandemic, there was also an increase in e-commerce in the country. There was also a realization that, a lot of women who didn't even have cellular phones, they realized that there is a need for them to start learning how to use mobile phones, and the social media especially. So even those who are professionals, teachers, for instance, even those working in offices, they had to learn how to use new applications which are not familiar to them before, so that they can continue their work and their studies, and for those who are in school. Of course, there were opportunities for e-commerce, and online selling opened up for some women. So next, please. Of course, I mentioned already started mentioning about the opportunities for e-commerce online selling. This was mentioned by the group of informal women who have their own businesses at home, and they saw the opportunity to sell online because it was difficult to sell. Before they used to sell in bazaars, but now they had to stop it. So online sell, they saw an opportunity for that. There was also an increased demand for online-based work. So for freelance work or for others who already have work, but they are able to get additional job online. So it adds to their earning. And then, of course, opportunities for learning, whether it's learning new applications or getting new information. Next, please. But while there are opportunities, we also saw a lot of challenges, especially for mothers. They said that they're all, while they may have jobs, during the pandemic, they were working from home, but at the same time, they had to do reproductive work at home. So, for instance, during the time, children were also, they had to do online studies. So mothers had to teach their children while at the same time, trying to balance their work. And then as women, they had to, do the cleaning, the cooking at home while at the same time also working. So they were really juggling a lot of work. So, and of course, not everyone have devices already, but for mothers especially, they realized that they had to buy even the cheap smartphone so that their children can use it for their online studies. But of course, they had to learn how to use it, the mobile phone. But the usual challenges still persisted. The connectivity issues, especially for those who are living in far-flung areas, geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. There's the issue of poor, weak signal. So it's difficult for them to communicate with other individuals or groups. And then the cost of buying data. In infrastructure was also mentioned. If there are not much towers, as mobile towers, then of course the connectivity is not good. And then power outages also happen. If there's no electricity, they can't connect. And this is especially true, especially in conflict affected areas, because we interviewed a woman who is residing in a conflict affected area. So she was saying that whenever there are military operations in their area, so they find that there's very weak signal. So if there's anything that they need, it's difficult for them to connect and to get information that's needed. Of course, the type of device that one has would affect also their how they are able to connect. Another challenge, which was earlier mentioned, is learning how to use mobile phones and creating social media applications. Then, of course, there's financial literacy, since a lot of things have, there was growth in e-commerce, but not a lot were still, not a lot were financially, not a lot would know how to use financial technology. Even the use of automated teller machines or ATMs or other financial applications like GCash in the Philippines. So they didn't know that. So they were prone to scams, and there was a lot of phishing for information to get this account from them. And we have to also take note that on banking is not really high in the Philippines. So even online banking isn't that popular, especially prior to the pandemic. So they had to learn a lot on how to do financial literacy during this time. Then the issue of course, of misinformation and disinformation. Next, please. I would just like to highlight some of the challenges, like women in the informal economy said that it's difficult for them, of course, to catch up with technology because they've been used to, selling their products in bazaars, in markets. So it was difficult for them to adapt to the use of technology, and they had to ask help from their children who know more about technology to help them sell their products. Next, please. For women with disabilities, of course, it's good that there are existing free tools and softwares, assistive technology that can help them, like screen readers, alternative text, etc., which can be used by disabled women. However, they say that whenever they go to some websites and platforms, these tools are not available. So there's still that challenge for them. And then when there are translations using artificial intelligence, sometimes the translations are not accurate. So it was also a challenge for women with disabilities. Next, please. For women who are already considered senior citizens, we say senior here in the Philippines if you're 60 years old and above. So of course, again, the issue of internet connection, the affordability, and outdated services, devices, that they have, and not knowing how to use applications. So they had to learn how to use, for instance, Zoom whenever they would have meetings with their own organizations. Next, please. Even for those who are very tech savvy and who work in the digital space, like a freelance worker, they have issues regarding not really connectivity. Yes, of course, they need fast a strong signal, but at the same time, freelance workers, for instance, they complain that they're not covered by health insurance, for instance. They are not covered by so they don't get a lot of benefits as freelance workers. There's no social security or other benefits, and they have to register with our Bureau of Internal Revenue as self-employed for payment of taxes. And they also said that, of course, even if they're tech savvy, they still encounter other problems, such as clients not being able to pay them as well. Next, please. But as mentioned, we also had an interview with a government, a representative from our government agency, the ICT in particular, and they said that they have actually programs and policies to promote digital inclusion in general. So there's the free Wi-Fi for all project. So during the pandemic, this was very much used by those who don't have connectivity. I think as of the present, there are 12,000 live sites for this. There's the Tech for Ed project and the Digital Jobs Philippines program. And then in 2022, the department also launched the Digital Innovation for Women Advancement, which aims to promote gender inclusion in the ICT field, and so that they can also participate and get jobs online. So, but of course, these projects, while they are there, they still need to be promoted because not a lot. I don't think that many women would know that there are such projects that exist. So there's still a need to create more awareness about these initiatives. On the part of, next please, of NGOs, there are also some support services for training, for instance, that target women in vulnerable sectors. So the trainings would include sessions on online marketing, graphic design, and coding, as well as, of course, basic media literacy. Yeah, so next please. So this highlights actually that meaningful connectivity is really important for women and girls, not just for accessing economic opportunities, getting work, continuing socialization, communication with family and friends, but this is about also learning new opportunities, promoting awareness about advocacies. And as one of the women we interviewed said, especially during the pandemic, it gave her, being connected gave her a sense of routine and normalcy when things did not seem normal. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thanks to all of our speakers, and thank you so much, Lisa, for closing us out on that note around meaningful connectivity, which is quite relevant to this conversation. Just reflecting on everything that we've heard so far, quite fitting that this study was actually titled Connected Resilience, because from the stories of how far women have to travel and what they have to deal with in order to travel for access, you can just get the sense that access does not come as easy, even for those women who are able to be connected and be online. We haven't even started to talk about the challenges they meet once they are actually online, such as the harassment, the violence, the technology-assisted violence against women more specifically. So at this moment, I would like to invite anyone, if you could please stop sharing, then I can see if anyone has their hand raised. I would love to invite anyone who may have a question or comment, or quite frankly, even to just share any experiences you are aware of that resonate or mirror some of these experiences that we've shared. And by the way, the report, which is on our website, has a lot more information for you all to go through, and I hope you are inspired by some of these stories. However, it's no longer enough for us to just be inspired by how women suffer in order to access something that everyone now considers as basic. I do hope that you are inspired to actually join all the efforts that are happening in your countries, globally, within your regions, to actually fight for closing this gender digital divide, and actually fighting for, raising the bar and ensuring that everyone has access to meaningful connectivity. I don't see any hands. I don't know if I'm missing anyone. Yeah, no, I don't see any hands. So let me also share that, one of the things that you will find when you go through the report is that this exclusion of women actually has a real financial cost, right? So this study was actually inspired by our first research on the cost of exclusion. In 2021, we released a study that identified that low and middle income countries had lost over $1 trillion in their economies by not having women included in the digital economy. So, and if we continue in this space where women continue to be left far behind in terms of digital connectivity, most of these countries stand to lose about $500 billion over the next 5 years. That is something that none of our economies can actually afford, right? And I often say that, I know all the soccer fans are busy watching soccer right now because there's all kinds of soccer leagues going on. So if you can think about perhaps one of your favorite teams literally benching half of its team members playing at a very important tournament. That's actually what it means to not have women online, because women are usually more than 50% of the population in most of these countries, yet we expect to have a thriving economy while not being inclusive of that 50%. So think about it, just in your favorite sport, just taking half of the team and putting them aside and still expecting to win. I think we know very well that that would not happen. And actually, that's what is happening to our economies as we continue to not address the gender digital divide in particular. So the report has been shared, Sarah. Just above your comment, there is a link to the actual report. So please do feel free to engage with that. We are also just really looking for more researchers who are interested in this topic. We hope that you've been inspired by some of the stories here, inspired enough to also want to help us uncover more, right? You know, there's so much more you can do in your community, in your country, for us to really paint a picture. I think when we talk about the gender digital divide, it's really difficult for most people, including policymakers sometimes, to really imagine what the lived experience of that looks like and what the actual impact of it really is. And it is through stories like the ones shared by Jenny and Lisa with us today that really help us peel through these narratives so that we actually help to enlighten the understanding of what gender digital divide is, but also what it means to our digital development as nations, because we obviously cannot advance in our digital development while we are leaving so many important communities behind. So I don't see any hands, comments, or anything in the chat unless I'm missing something. But if you
Onica,
have a comment, go ahead and unmute, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Onica, and thanks, team, for the impressive research and the presentation. My question was on what are the plans to for the future? Do you plan to continue doing this research in the future, cover more countries, or maybe trace the progress in the countries that have been covered in this research? Could you please share on that?
We certainly plan to continue to add more countries to the study that we've done. As you can imagine, the cost of doing, especially the qualitative data collection, is quite prohibitive sometimes, but we are very much committed to that. And I'm going to invite Ingrid, actually, because I feel like she has spent a lot of time ideating and thinking a lot about, you know, how to improve this. But I also just want to give a shout out to our research team, because one of the new concepts they introduced in this particular report was policy ethnography, which, you know, Ingrid can tell us a little bit more about it, but it's actually really one of the new things that we've introduced to this kind of research through this report, to not only do household surveys and you know, interview individuals, but to really look at how policy is affecting the status quo and what could be tweaked in policy in order to improve where we are. Ingrid, over to you.
Thanks, Onica, and thanks, Talan, for that great question. Yeah, so in our current methodology and definitely looking forward, we reflected a lot on where are there actually information and data and understanding gaps. And at this point, we finally have quite a bit of data out there on the digital gender gap across countries. It's not always collected sustainably or at the national level on a regular basis, but we have, you know, through ours and other studies, such as the GSMA Gender Gap Study and others, we have a pretty good baseline. We know a lot of what the barriers are that women are facing, although they're also changing rapidly as the digital world also evolves. But we really found that we wanted to understand the institutional perspective, so of policymakers and implementers and people in ministries, ICT ministries, but also education ministries and those working on digital economy and others. You know, what is their role? What are the challenges to them actually conquering this problem face on? And so that's where we also see an opportunity to continue to engage with these stakeholders, to socialize the topic, and also normalize this kind of more holistic, comprehensive approach, looking across sectors, looking at how gender data is collected and analyzed, including qualitatively. Yeah, so I'll stop at that and also invite Nyambura to come in on our methodologies as well.
Nyambura, are you able to come in?
Thanks, Onica. Thanks, Daland. Thank Ingrid. I think your response is quite interesting because also our idea is just not to pinpoint the challenges, but also to work with the policymakers to come up with the solutions. And that informed our choice of the people, of the policymakers we spoke to, including the regulator, because again, one of the things is that there's universal service fund that I think is in almost all the countries, but you'll find the usage of these funds is not as probably should be, because the focus then should be to target the people that need to be connected, and those are the rural people. And then in terms of collaboration, working together, that we are having this movement in Kenya where the young generation are saying, if the solutions are for us, then we must be included. And I think that is the way we need to move forward. That is not just about policies, but they are policies that are effective and they're efficient. And we are talking to the people who are affected. Because again, it doesn't matter whether you connect all the people who are elite, they are educated, they are socio-economic status, again, it is a higher level. Then what happens to the majority of the people whose livelihoods can be improved by this connectivity? So yes, in terms of expansion, it is good. We have learned a lot from this round one, and the next round, I think now will be more open to find out collaborative ways of addressing these issues, so that we're not coming back with the several countries saying these are the challenges. I think the challenges in Kenya could be the same in Pakistan, could be the same in Japan, rural areas. So basically, what are these solutions we need to come up with? And how, again, do we ensure the civil society, the private sector, the government, they are involved? And most of all, the education sector. Because again, we are talking of like our continent in Africa. Over 70% are young people. They are in schools, they are in the digital space, and they're like, how do we ensure, first of all, they are confident in that space? And their confidence is based on online safety. We have the tools to ensure that they can be secure. Are they aware of what they can do? And with this, again, are we moving with the parents in the rural areas? Because again, we are saying, if you don't move with the parents, who most of the times are ignored because they don't fit in the civil society, they don't fit in the private sector, they are not in policy, but they're the parents of our kids. And our kids are the one we are preparing the digital space for the future. So if you don't move around with them, if you don't move along with the parents, then we lose the kids. And you are as comfortable as your confidence in that digital space. So those are some of the things we have learned from this study and will inform our next round of studies. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think I'll just do a quick plug in that we are actually planning to do some more in-depth workshops around connected resilience at regional levels, where we will actually go through this report, but also how to empower local researchers and digital advocates on how to use the report to advocate for meaningful connectivity and closing the gender digital divide at the regional and national levels. So please do stay connected with us. Make sure you have signed up to our newsletter on our website. We'll definitely be sending out the announcements via social media platforms as well when the opportunity is open to sign up for those, because it would really be great to see more of the people who work around these issues be able to do the kind of analysis that Lisa did in the Philippines, that Jenny did in India, so that we have more countries that can take this report and be able to look inward for some of these things, but also looking at the policy instruments that could be an opportunity for addressing the gender digital divide. And with that, I thank all of you for spending this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are with us. And this is not goodbye. We are available online. If there's any other thoughts you have, sometimes thoughts come later after the program has ended. Our emails are open. So please, let's continue the conversation, and remember to always ask the question, what about the women? Thank you.